Lyz Kelley, and I am presenting Right to Market, a template for hitting your target market. And I'm presenting today with Nora. Would you like to introduce yourself?
That should work. There we go. I'm Nora. I write end-to-end romance, also known as gay romance. And Lyz told me to say to you that it's a very small niche and that I'm killing it. So that's her word. As I was just explaining, I'm from the Netherlands originally, so bragging makes me physically uncomfortable.
Well done for being physically uncomfortable.
Yeah,
well,
I know, right?
I'm Aidy Aaward. I write curvy girl romance, paranormal and contemporary. And I'm on this panel because I grew my business from $500 to $50,000 a year.
I'm Dylann, and I don't know why I'm on this panel. I think they just had a seat at the end that they wanted me to fill. I write contemporary. I'm a hybrid author. I have traditional books as contemporary westerns, some fake cowboys, and some indies. I just published my first indie this past spring. So. I have to sit over there alone?
If you want to sit down there too?
Yes!
Okay.
We're moving chairs.
That's what you get for showing up late.
That's my fault. I took her to the wrong spot.
All right.
She drinks Pepsi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Apparently not. Hi. I'm Lidell. I write reverse harem romance. And I did my full introduction on the last panel, so
All right.
I'll stop holding this up much longer.
Okay.
I tend to be really blunt.
So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to present a presentation, and then after the presentation we are going to have a panel discussion. So for the video we're going to go ahead and get through the presentation because I really want to describe what we're talking about when we're talking about right to market. So writing to market is not the same thing as writing to trend. And one of the things I think is very important is I've come out of some conferences and I go to my Facebook groups and everybody's like, oh, I gotta delete my manuscript, I'm gonna trash it. And so I really wanna say, please take your finger off the delete button. Please don't do it, because I wanna show you today that you, if you are an author, you are writing to a market. And I really want to emphasize that because you are really writing to market. Writing is not selling out. You can still write what you love and still write to market. And writing to trend is applying your own right to market principles and still writing what you love. So let's talk about what the right to market formula is. It's defining your pillars. It's selecting your genre. It's understanding your reader expectations. It's aligning your story tropes. It's designing your book covers. And it's selecting your target market keywords. All of that being in alignment will float your book to the top of the charts. All right? So let's talk about what the right to market float is. When I'm talking about that right to market float, I'm talking about the pillars. I'm talking about those things that are in your books. It's your writer's why. It's the reason that you write. It's the reason that you get out of bed in the morning. It's the reason that you are passionate about writing. And the reason that I'm talking about the pillars here is because pillars are like table legs, right? When somebody comes in and gives you that 1-star review, and says your book's not good enough, then you understand, you're like, you know what, you're not my right reader for me, for my books, right? When I talk about branding, and I talked about branding a lot at 20Books Edinburgh, is I realized that people were writing for money, they were writing because they had to write, but they really didn't understand their writer's why. Understanding your writer's why and why you are writing, it's basically, oh, by the way, that's your writer's voice. It's the words that you select. It's the way you put sentences together. It's everything that goes into your book. It's your passion that drives your book and attracts the right readers to your book. So that it's so critical that you find your writer's why. It's your, again, it's your writer's voice, and it's the reason you keep writing when you've been knocked down. Because at the end of the day, you have something to say to the world, and the world needs to hear what you have to say, right? Okay. Right to market float, the next thing is selecting your genres. Once you know your writer's why, naturally you will select those genres that will able to transmit your voice out into the world. And those books genres for romance could be something like romantic suspense, contemporary, young adult, history, fantasy, sci-fi. One of the things that I found really interesting is I had a very false belief. I wrote a contemporary romance. And I was at sort of a tired, numb, dead space. And what happened is I had a friend, Aidy Aaward, talk me into writing a sci-fi romance. But I just was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do this for fun because I've always wanted to do it, but nobody's ever gonna cross over from my contemporary group because contemporary romance readers don't always read sci-fi romance, right? Don't always. Well, she laughs at me every day because I was totally wrong. Because that sci-fi romance was still small town, because it still had my voice, because it still had my writer's why in it, I converted a whole bunch of contemporary romance readers to sci-fi readers, right? So please understand that sometimes we as writers have false beliefs, and those false beliefs really truly are false. So go out and try and kill it. If you want to write a sci-fi romance and see how it works, go ahead and do that. If you want to write a time traveler, if you want to write something, if you are numb from writing whatever you're writing and you want to spur your career, go ahead and try it. Because once you try it, you might find a whole bunch of new readers. And I got some sci-fi readers that are now reading contemporary. Okay, also what I think is really important is at some point in time, you find your virtual bookshelf, right? So where do you find that bookshelf? As indie authors, we have a perception that we don't need a bookshelf. We don't need a place to put our books on that virtual bookshelf. And what I'm saying is that if you really truly know where your books belong, when you go to Amazon and select your categories, or you go to iBook and select your categories, you're going to have an easier time of helping readers find your books. That is very important to know what you're writing and to know why you're writing it. Next, your reader expectations. This is critical. I think you've heard on the panel earlier today that you really truly need to know what your reader expectations are. And that is critical because are you writing a happily ever after? That is the key to romance. But are you writing a dark? Are you writing a cozy? Are you writing urban? Are you writing rural? Are you writing hot, sensual, closed doors? You need to know what your writer is expecting from your books. The better that you know what you're writing, the better that you know what your reader is expecting when they pick up your book, the easier time that you're going to find your writers and meet their expectations, or your readers and meet their expectations. Thank you. All right? Have you ever tried to reach out, if you have a newsletter, I put a survey in my newsletter often. Because even if you have 10 people, even if you have 100 people, the more you ask the readers, the more they will tell you and engage with your work, and they will get that information out. Story tropes. We all talk about the story tropes, but are you aligning your reader expectations for a story trope? One of the things that I've seen recently in the book that I read was a billionaire romance in a small town. And to me, I kept thinking, oh, I don't get this. But that was me and my expectations of that reader. When I picked up a billionaire romance, I was expecting it to be in New York or Chicago or London or Paris. I wasn't expecting it to be in a town of 1,200 people. So make sure that you understand when you are looking at your reader expectations, you're picking the tropes that your readers are expecting to read. Lastly, book covers. Book covers are so incredibly important, and we will go on that. You will see as we analyze some of these books, how those books set that reader expectation from a visual, and also set that expectation from your writer's why. You are communicating what you're writing every single time that you're putting a book cover onto a platform for delivery. One of the things that came out of the Romance Authors Mastermind last year was story grids. What I've done up here is selected some book covers to show colors. You don't even need to see this from the back of the room, but you can see that each one of those book cover grids is written specifically for a specific genre. What you are doing, if you put a storyboard together like this, I do this every time I send something to my cover artist, because I am telling her, these are the colors, these are the moods, these are the fonts, these are the colors that should be there. And once you do your book cover and you get your book cover back, you should put your book cover in that grid and make sure that it's the #1 book cover that is selected by your newsletter, your peers or whatever. Make sure that that's the #1 book cover that is selected. Keywords. Again, keywords slice right through all of this, right? It slices to your writer's why, it slices into your reader expectations, it slices into the tropes that you select, it slices all the way through to your writer's float. Understand that keywords are also in your book blurbs, in your tweets, in your Facebook posts, in your marketing copy. It should be in everything. You are living your writer's why on social media. So please keep that in mind when you're making a post, that you also should be shouting out what you write and who you're writing it to, so that, again, you're attracting the right readers. Okay? So the Right to Market template is here. It's in your handouts. So one of the things that I'd like to challenge you to do is find out if everything within your book or with what you are writing is in alignment, and then fix it, because we are independent publishers, right? We can fix our book if something is off. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit later on to you as well. Okay, so we're going to get to Aidy, and Aidy is going to present her alignment.
Okay, so we're using one of my books as an example of how I wrote to market and how my brand, pillars, all of the above, the whole float was aligned. So we'll start, I guess we're starting with, oh, well, first you get to see the cover. Can't see that pillar yet, but hold on. So that's the cover for the first book in my Dragons Love Curve series. This series makes me the most money, partially because that cover is super hot to market. Man chest, yes. Tattooed guy, yes. And you can't see very well from the image here, but that's a dragon on him, and so that's the hint that this is paranormal romance. So my pillars for my entire brand is that I write curvy girls, because when I started looking at the market, there just weren't very many books out there with heroines like me. but I felt like there was a big need for that, so it was a niche that I could fulfill. And it's a niche that's obviously important to me, because look, I'm a curvy girl. And so a big part of my pillars is that everyone deserves love. That theme is in every single one of my books. The genres that I chose to write this in that I thought best suited for what kind of stories I wanted to tell was the paranormal romance. So I do basically shifters with curvy girls. And then I also do BDSM contemporary, because part of, again, that goes back to my pillars. The messaging is everybody deserves love, even if you're kinky. Thanks. I like you too. Alright, so I started doing reader expectations, so let's talk about my paranormal romances. So for this series specifically, this is the first series that I wrote to market. So I have another series that came out before this that doesn't make any money because it wasn't written to market, because I don't really know about right to market. But when I decided to do paranormal romance, I basically sat down with a group of readers who were all, some of them are also writers, but they all read paranormal romance. And so we just started talking about, and they didn't even know that they were called tropes, because readers don't call them tropes. I just said, what are the things you like to see in your shifter romances? Because I want to write a dragon shifter romance. And they started giving me all, seriously, I have a list of like 50 things that they talked about. And they're like, ooh, it's got to have, and all of these things. So here's some of them. So I went with fated mates because that's the trope in shifter romance. But the things that were important to that trope, the elements of the trope. So you can have fated mates, but you can't just say, okay, and they're fated, the end. Right? You have to have the elements that go in that. And so my readers told me the elements were insta-love, often a mating frenzy, you gotta have an alpha male, you have to have animal traits, and when the mate is found, they know it. So how did these fit with curvy girls? That's where the alignment comes in. Curvy girls are often coming from a place of that they don't deserve love. So you wanna know what kind of book I wanna read? Somebody who's instantly in love with me. That's how that aligns to my pillars. See where I'm going?
So also for Aidy, I'm just gonna pop in here, they also told her what they hated about fated mates, what authors got wrong. So not only did they tell her what they wanted to see, they told her what they hated.
So I also, so that was part of the reader's expectations, and then the tropes. You can fit these kinds of expectations into all kinds of tropes. Enemies to lovers worked really good for this series because, again, curvy girls often feel like that guy is their enemy, right? I mean, if you're not a curvy girl, maybe you didn't do that, but I think so. And so I do a lot of enemies to lovers, but I also do a lot of friends to lovers. And then keywords, yo, sexy, sassy, who doesn't want to be called that, but curvy girls especially. I think that would be curvy woman, no, with a period in between. Yes, we're all women.
Sorry.
Stubborn, hot, male, claim, that's a huge one. Obviously dragon, and then soulmate, super important in paranormal romance.
All right. Thank you, Aidy.
We'll do questions at the end.
Okay. Nora, you're up.
Very short intro. I'm one of those weird people who really thinks about stuff before she does it. So my first book released in October 2017, and I did a ton of research before I did that. That being said, my first series did pretty well, but it wasn't as aligned as it could have been, and this was the first book I wrote that was completely aligned, which is why I picked this. So again, I write gay romance. The title is Kissing the Teacher, so they kind of get away the joke. Which really helps, because teacher-student romance is pretty hot. He's a college teacher, in case people are worried about age of consent. I mean, it's all above board, really. So we have a hot cover, a half-naked guy, obviously, because I write pretty steamy stuff, so that sets the reader expectation. So my pillars in general of my brand, slightly kinky, steamy gay romance with all the feels, and this is kind of like I'm wearing on my shirt. Love has no shame. That's kind of my brand. like she said, everything comes back to everybody deserves love. For me, it comes back to you're wired the way you are wired. The way you love and who you love, that shouldn't be something that you are ashamed of. So love is love. That comes back in all of my books. Genre is gay romance, romance, 2 different names for the same romance. Contemporary, I also write some paranormal, and I write sci-fi. Reader expectations in general for romance, and specifically for my books. Sexy is what readers have come to expect from me. I have one book that has less heat, and readers actually are like, what's happening? And I'm like, it's a slow burn. Book 2 will have the sex, and they're like, okay. So we'll get there. Slightly kinky, there's always something going on. Can be BDSM, it's usually not full out, it's just something. I experiment with stuff, I love it. At least 2 men, I also write MMM, and I also write MMMM. That's a lot of M's. Those sex scenes are fun to write, let me tell you. Men who are, oh yes, all the body parts, that's what I'm saying, you gotta keep track, man. Men who are a tad broken. I don't like perfect guys. My guys often have something. PTSD is something I write about a lot because I have it myself, so I write from personal experience. People who are wounded, people who are have disabilities in various kinds. I love to write those kind of men because they feel real to me. A perfect guy is not someone I can relate to. All the feels. My books will make you feel. In fact, I released a book a couple of days ago, and my readers are posting in my group right now, is that they needed 2 boxes of tissues. So it's like, I want to make readers feel, because I think that's what romance is, and absolutely a happy end. A romance is not a romance without a happy end, and that's a hill I'm willing to die on. Tropes, obviously this one is student-teacher trope, as clear from the title. It also has daddy kink, which is super popular still in romance, and it's something I love to write. Other tropes I've played around with, friends to lovers. This one has hurt comfort. The student in this case is someone from who came out of a difficult relationship, who's struggling financially, so there's a lot of hurt comfort going on there. Out for you is a popular trope in general in romance, someone who doesn't realize that they might not be entirely straight until they meet the right guy, and then out for you, bisexual awakening, whatever you want to call it, just don't call it gay for you, because that's not how it works. And second chance, enemies to lovers, I play around with a lot of tropes. Tropes are huge. I cannot stress that enough. If you write romance, tropes are absolutely crucial. If I read your blurb, I need to immediately see what tropes you're hitting. If your blurb doesn't tell me, your blurb sucks. I need to see the trope. Okay, I hope that was clear.
She's not opinionated at all. No opinionated at all.
Well,
but she's right. She changed my blurb. My sales spiked the next week. She changed it.
so here comes the bragging part, so watch me be physically uncomfortable, because
You can do it.
okay, emotional part. My first book came out in October 2017, so 2018 was the first year that I had a full year, and I made over $100,000. This year I'm looking at $200,000. So that in 2 years, I want to say, shows that I know what I'm doing. And that's the bragging part, because now I'm like,
But that's the power of writing to market and being aligned, is that you can do that.
So
Absolutely.
now, since we've looked at 2 aligned books, which, are you finished?
well, the keywords are pretty obviously.
Yeah,
You know,
so-
gay romance, daddy, Valentine. This one was Valentine's Day themed, so we released it around Valentine's Day. Part of the series, did amazing.
Okay. So one of the things that I find frustrating with most workshops is they present perfect pictures, and I find that I struggle with it a lot. So I'm going to present my own books just because I missed the market. My books sold well, but they didn't sell as well as I would have hoped for. And I analyzed it because I'm a business analyst, and I went back and went, what's wrong with my books? Why aren't they selling? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? So I'm going to show you exactly what I did wrong. I write about everyday heroes healing love. And I write in various different genres, contemporary, paranormal, women's fiction. But in this instance, I was writing in contemporary. And I want to show you these 2 covers. They are for the same book. the exact same book. When I launched with the orange cover, and I launched a second chance love story. But unfortunately, I also had a murder mystery in the book, and I missed the target for my cover, so I recovered. And you will see how I misaligned, because when I actually started, my reader expectations, I was in a small town, and my reader small town expectations were yearning for love and all of those small town reader expectations, but then I added murder mystery and life and danger and hero will save the day. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I will tell you from a marketing perspective, and I think you've heard already that marketing is really important. I have a heck of a time trying to find readers because I don't know how to market these books, right? Because I'm actually splitting my market into small town and murder. Then as you go forward, my tropes are okay because I've got second chance. That can be both in small town and reader expectations. But then look at my keywords. This is where I ran into problems. Second chance, cozy, small town, humor, murder. Afraid, drama, honorable. What am I supposed to do with that, right? I mean, I did find my readers. This book, I have over 45,000 copies in distribution. I did really well. Could I have done better? Had I aligned this book to the market, put on the right cover with the right keywords, and kept within either small town, I either kept in small town or I did romantic suspense, I would have not sliced my market. So what I did is I took the romance and I took small town and then I took romantic suspense. So I wrote to a market. I absolutely wrote to a market, but I wrote to a smaller market than I intended to write to. Okay? So let's talk about the next one. And I put the whole slide up here because I really want you to see this. I changed the cover and I changed the author's name because I wanted to keep it anonymous. But I want to tell you, this is a real book. And the author is struggling because the author is like, but my book's not selling. And I'm like, but I get that. But let's talk about this book because their pillars are overcoming tragedy and strength within. That's what they're passionate about writing, right? And they've decided that they can write in romance, paranormal, sci-fi, and historical. And I'm like, I can't really see how overcoming tragedy, strength within actually is clear enough as a branding statement for all four of those genres. Then when I look at reader expectations and I'm looking at historical, and I'm looking at research accuracy, social etiquette, time travel, because this has historical, time travel, shape-shifting elements. I'm looking at the market for this, right? And so one of the things that I'm looking at is here's romance, right? And here's historical. Big market, right? You're fine. And then all of a sudden, you are taking a step this way. Can I borrow that for a second? You're taking a step this way, right, for your time travel. And then what you're doing is you're taking a couple more steps this way, slicing your market into shapeshifters. And then I will have to tell you, because you see the cover, romance people, ants. Now, if there's any sci-fi people in here, do not crucify me because I know about Ant-Man. I do, but I tell you from a romance hero's perspective, ants are not sexy. No, ants are not sexy. Sorry. So So when you're looking at this book, I mean, can you see the challenge that this writer is going to have publishing this book? Because they wrote to a market this size. This size. Right? So there is somebody that is going to love this book. And I'm not saying not publish this book, but if you are out to make your voice heard, if you are out to make people see your writing, if you are out to make people hear your voice, write to a market that's this big, or this big, or even this big, because we have an author over here that's writing to a niche market and she is killing it. So, let's talk about how do I find my reader expectations. Read a lot of books. You know, one of the things is I talk to some authors and they don't really know what their reader expectations are, but they know in their gut what their reader expectations are, because why? They've read 1,000 gazillion books in what they love. Watch movies, join reader groups, Facebook, Goodreads, libraries, survey your readers, ask fellow authors, ask librarians. Bottom line, do your homework. Last takeaway, every book is written to a market. The more elements out of balance, the smaller your target market. And if you write to your pillars, you will write a book of your heart, and you will attract the right readers for your books. Okay, alignment is the key to your success. So let's start with some questions. I'm going to move this over here and give these guys the panel. So come on up if you have questions. There you go.
I had a question about the right to market partial. So you have a situation where you've kind of diffused your market. Did you do any rewriting, or did you kind of say, I'm going to just pick what's the strongest and I'm going to ignore the other part, assuming that people will kind of come along because they like the story anyway?
This book has average 4.7 star reviews. So I knew the book was written well. I just didn't know how to market it. So I didn't do a rewrite. I could have, but I didn't do it because this is the first book in a series of, I had already almost pushed out 5 books in this series before I realized it wasn't written to market. So I, as an author, made that decision. You do have a choice to rewrite, but I went ahead and picked those elements that I thought were going to better align with what I had. I analyzed it and said, you know what, I picked that second cover, and that second cover is actually selling. The second thing that I did is, because I was struggling with this, I put it in a box set. My box set of this series is now killing it. Anyone else?
I actually have a question. Sorry, before I break something. So I'm one of those actually that plays around with genres. I fit a lot of genres in the same book. I specifically write urban fantasy and paranormal, but when you read the story, it actually is a multi-genre story, which you just told me that I split out my market. Is there a way to actually figure out how to market it more wide, to reach the audience that will actually be interested in one or the other, but you can pull them to become your readers for those specific stories?
I would look specifically at the genres that you're combining, and look what are the determining factors for that specific genre, and then see which genre you incorporate the most of. So if you have some elements of, say, urban fantasy, and some elements of romance, and some elements, look at what elements are the strongest and market to that market. Because if you market to multiple audiences, you're gonna miss your mark. You gotta pick one. And it may mean rewriting your blurb to target that specific audience, but you have to make sure that your book fits the qualifications for that genre. Like, romance is the easiest. If it doesn't have a happy end, I don't care if there's a love story in it. If it doesn't have a happy end, it's not a romance. So you can't call it a romance if they don't end up together. Urban fantasy has very specific things like this has to happen. This has to, like a setting and certain paranormal. If it doesn't have that, you can't call it an urban fantasy because the readers who will pick up your book are going to be disappointed. So I would argue backward, and if you look at your book, what can readers expect from that, and what genre fits best with those expectations? Or you're looking at a rewrite, which is not something you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. No, but what about if the genres actually complement each other? Like the romantic suspense, action, and adventure with the urban fantasy, the paranormal.
I think you're saying, hey, you guys are talking about splitting the audience, but why can't I have both audience instead of splitting the audience? Can't I just, and the answer is, you could be unicorn. However, in at least my experience, and I think you don't get both audience because your first audience starts reading it, and the tropes of the other audience make them not as interested in the book. So you kind of lose them because they're going, that's not what I'm expecting. And then your other half is doing the same thing. They picked it up because they wanted, I'm making this up, dogs. And suddenly Cat shows up and they're like, I was set for a dog book. So I'm gonna go find a book that's just about dogs. And you're going, why am I not getting both dog people and cat people?
Because they hate each other.
Because they're looking for something the same but different. They're looking for a lot of books they just read, and they wanted that similar feeling. And when they're not, a lot of times they're not willing to go on that journey with you. So
Unless you already know.
you could be a unicorn, or
If you're already known, you can pull it off. Like if you're an author who has a fan base, then you can bring them into a different genre or cross genres. But until then, either you're a unicorn or it's gonna fail. Sorry.
I have one more to add to that. I helped Lyz Kelley with some of her rebranding of the Blinded book in the series. We talked a lot about how to market that book. And at the end of the day, she wrote it as a small town contemporary, but we ended up marketing it as a romantic suspense because it had more romantic suspense elements, and the contemporary romance elements were just sort of there. So I think it's pick the one, like what she said at the beginning, pick the one that is the most and market to those ones.
Yeah, do your alignment. Like I said, I gave you the template. This template, do your alignment and figure out where it is. Do this analysis, do your hard work. It will pop, your answer will pop out.
I think that was my biggest problem.
It will pop out here, right here. So do that.
Well, and I was gonna say too, just because you are writing kind of in 2 different genres or 3 different genres, we're not saying like don't write that book, but if you're trying to write to market, and it depends again kind of on your why, are you writing for money? Do you need to replace full-time income? Are you writing the book of your heart that you want to write? Depending on what you're trying to do, I mean, there's nothing wrong with writing a book that combines all those genres, but if you're trying to write to market, then you probably need to pick one.
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions. Aidy, what did your focus group say they didn't like? And Nora, how many books did you release last year for that total you gave us?
So one of the things that my focus group said that they really didn't like was when the fated mates felt forced. So like they had to be mates, which I think is a really easy line to cross in fated mates. They wanted it, and this is harder to write, and so you have to read a lot of books to figure out how authors are doing it. They wanted it to feel like there's still a choice, but they're still always going to be together. I liken that sort of a little bit to fake relationship. They don't think they're going to be together, but they are.
I like that. Sorry, how many books? Jeez, Kylie, 25? I think 20 solo and 5 co-written, but that's
Last year though.
just last year. In 1 year, 15. Yeah, I think 15, full size.
How
Mine are usually longer, but I want to say between 70 and 90,000.
What could I do to get your time turner?
Have no life.
So I have a question about altering or taking your own twist on a trope. Alex, I scrolled down what you were saying this morning about respecting your readers' expectations. Like, I'll give an example. I've written a shifter series, and I was like, I don't like fated mates, and I was like, everybody else does. So, I mean, for anybody, do you feel comfortable putting your own twist on something that says, well, here's this as a way that I can enjoy it? How far are you willing to go before it gets too far from what the readers like? So, I mean, anybody who wants to share that, I'm curious. Like, if there's elements of a trope that you say, that's not my thing, but I can still make this fated mates, or I can still make this reverse harem, or...
Alright, so the question is, what if you don't personally care too much about that specific trope, but that specific trope is important in what you're writing?
Yeah.
How do you combine those?
Sure.
All right, I am stealing a term that I did not come up with, which is magic cookies. Magic, which is first finding what is it that's really fun and interesting for you. Like, what makes you excited to write? For example, for me, I like writing physical training scenes, especially like when the guy is training with the girl to, and it becomes brutal and there's sparring and it gets sexy. So I say, okay, I enjoy that tension. So now I look what trope would work well with that, right? So I'm going to find, protectiveness on its own is not a huge, I will finish with 30 seconds, just the guy being overprotective is not a trope that I normally is something that strikes for me. But when I said, okay, he's overprotective, and the way he's overprotective is going, you need to learn to fight. Right? So you really need to learn to defend. I'm being so hard on you and we're having this training scene because otherwise I'm going to stay up worrying all the time and I'm still going to stay up worrying. So that is how I combine it. I start with the magic cookie and then use the trope as a kind of, I meld them together.
Thank you, everyone.
Can I add something really quick? I swear, 10 seconds. 10%. That's my bottom line. If you take a trope and you write it, you have about 10% leeway in how you change it up. That's about what readers will accept. If you deviate further, you're not writing the trope. They're gonna get pissed.
Thank you.
So I really struggle with finding keywords or good keywords to promote my book. What would you recommend how could I get better at finding the right keywords to promote a book or target the audience?